Bundy's Garage, Bundy here. Today we're doing an oil change on a 2016 Nissan Rogue with a 2.5 liter engine, 4-cylinder. I just wanted to show you these to you before I get started. These are ramps, plastic ramps. They also make ones out of metal as well, or steel. I bought these, I don't even know how long ago. Years, probably when I first started turning wrenches on cars at 9 years old. These have saved me so much time and effort buying these. You can find these at any major auto parts store. Lowe's, Home Depot, AutoZone, O'Reilly's. I've seen them at Kmart, I've seen them at Sears. But they basically allow you to do is you don't have to get a jack and a jack stand. You basically just drive. You just drive your vehicle up onto the ramps and you're ready for an oil change. Or if you're doing suspension work, or if you're looking for leaks. I guess it wouldn't work if you need to take off the tire. Why am I showing you this? Because this is one of the best investments I've ever made when it comes to fixing vehicles. So get your vehicle, what, 7 inches up? So if you plan on doing a lot of automotive work yourself, a lot of DIY work, go ahead and pick these things up. Okay, now the fun stuff. Let's get the vehicle up onto the ramps. (2016) Nissan Rogue with a 2.5 liter. Right here, under recommended fluids, lubricants, and capacities, we have engine oil drain and refill, with oil filter change, without oil filter change. So it looks like in US measurements it's calling for 4 7/8 quarts. Without oil filter change would be 4.5. So let's get down there, drain the oil, and we'll come up on top, fill it up with 4 7/8 quarts. Looking at this 2.5 liter Nissan engine, here is the oil dipstick, marked in yellow, right where my finger's pointing at, right here. So this is how we'll check it. And then if you want to know where to fill it, it's right back here. The oil fill plug is right there. It has this little universal symbol on here. It says oil, oil. So right down there, that's where we put the oil in. What I typically like to do, I'll leave the oil cap off and pull out the oil dipstick as well, just so that the oil drains out that much more quickly. There's not a vacuum created when you pull the plug down there. What you're looking at is the front of the vehicle coming underneath right here. Oil drain pan bolt. You have to remove this bolt to remove the engine oil. I'm guessing it's going to be a 14. Yep, 14 millimeter. Righty tighty, lefty loosey. So I'll be pushing that way towards the passenger side tire. Alright, it's broke loose. It's broken loose. You can see it's starting to leak right there. So let's go ahead, bring in a drain pan, put it underneath, pull this bolt all the way out. It's best if you can to have the engine be warm a little bit. I mean, you don't want to burn yourself and have the engine scalding hot. But if you can have the engine just a little bit warm, operating temperature, it'll help the engine oil flow that much more easily out of the oil pan. So in one quick motion, pull this out. Make sure your pan that you're draining into isn't full. So we'll let that drain out for a little bit. The longer you can let this drain, the better. On my vehicles, when I do these oil changes, I usually let the engine oil drain out overnight. Having it drain overnight, you get half a quart more of used oil out of your engine than if you were to just let it drain the minimal. And don't even get me started on the quick oil change places that are out there. They, in all honesty, they really don't care. Their whole business model is set on a churn and burn outfit. They have to get as many cars as they can through the door to make as much money as possible, and as well in services that most people typically don't need. That being a transmission flush, blinker fluid flush, a new flux capacitor flush. Whatever they can sell, they're gonna try to get you to buy it, because that's how they make their money. Power steering flush. Grandma needs her fluids topped off. It really is that bad. No joke. No yoke. If you want to find a reputable mechanic, my best bet is to go on Google and read some reviews, or throw up a Facebook post asking people where they get their work done, and you probably have pretty good success with that. This is where the oil drain bolt is, right there. Right here, behind this shroud, it's the oil filter, right there. Let's see if I can pull it out. No, it's too tight. So you need to get a oil filter wrench. Pull that thing out. If you don't have an oil filter wrench, but you have a big channel locks, you can actually get in there, bring the channel locks on, grip onto it, pull it loose. Because the subframe is right here. This is your subframe. So I'll actually get a piece of paper, or not a piece of paper, a piece of cardboard or plastic, stick it under here, and then loosen up the oil filter, because this will have oil will have a tendency to drip into your subframe, and it just makes that much more of a mess. So if you can actually guide the used motor oil by sticking a piece of plastic or cardboard and having it basically waterfall over the subframe, it just makes the job that much more easy. And especially if you're working at a dealership, this happened a lot of times where you would change the oil on somebody's car. Whoever was doing the oil change, the mechanic at the time, didn't take the time or care to make sure that the oil didn't get into the subframe by guiding the old oil out. And so it would get in there, the customer would go home, they pull away, there's spots of oil in their driveway, they're ticked, and they call the dealership and find out why, just because then your CSI rating goes down and blah, 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 blah. I'll let this drain just a little bit longer. Okay, it's been draining for about 20 minutes now, so I think that's good enough. If I had more time, I would let this thing drain overnight. Like I said earlier, letting it drain overnight just gets that much more used motor oil out. I've seen it get as much as half a quart out, letting it drain overnight. So just go ahead, guide this in, don't cross thread it. When I bring in the wrench to tighten this down, I'm just going to snug it. There was a, let's see, let me do this real quick. There is a copper washer. Make sure that is in place when you change it out, or when you put the bolt back in. Make sure that washer is in place right there. Helps prevent oil leaks. So go ahead and start that by hand, get that into place. Now we'll snug that up. Then we'll move over to the oil filter, going towards the driver's side now. This is a zero offset wrench. I've talked about these before. I love them, so I'll put a link in the description below where you can buy some on Amazon. Okay, that's good. That's all you need to do. You don't have to crank down on this thing. So right above the camera right now is the oil filter. I got this piece of cardboard, I don't know, what, 5 inches, 4 inches. Cut it in half, and I will actually put it into place when it starts to drain, so I can guide the old oil out. This is an oil filter wrench, just like on the bolt, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. Depending on which way you have the oil filter wrench will decide which way loosens, which way tightens. You just have to flip the thing over to actually get it tightened, because your clamping force is right here on this part of the oil filter wrench. Okay, you have this little shroud right here. So actually go ahead, I'll push this up. It's actually sitting on the brake caliper. So righty-tighty, lefty-loosey to get this thing off. So I actually have to probably get in here with 2 hands to loosen it up. Okay, it's loose. So I'll bring in my makeshift oil guide here. Come in with my other hand. Actually, I need this a little bit more loose. Okay, there we go. Okay, we'll guide that oil out. There it comes. Don't know if you guys can hear that, but it's gurgling out. So this just makes the job that much more professional and that much more clean when you're doing it, and helps prevent Little oil drips on people's driveways when they get home. Nissan oil filter right there. This is the original filter. This vehicle only has 7,000 miles on it, so it's actually its first oil change. Another thing you want to do, I'm going to hold this in place, so sorry if kind of hard for me to point, but here, this O-ring, this gasket, this oil filter O-ring or gasket doesn't have a tendency. Sometimes it stays on the mounting surface on the engine block. So one thing you want to look for is make sure that the old oil filter and the old gasket O-ring has actually come off with the old filter, because you don't want to double up on O-rings. It can cause all kinds of problems. You can lose oil pressure. You can lose oil going down the road. I've heard it. I've talked to a couple guys that's happened to. They took their vehicle to a huge national chain, Walmart, and they doubled up on the O-ring, the oil filter O-ring, and they lost all their oil going down the freeway. So next thing I'll do, I'll leave that there for a second. I'll go get a can of brake clean off all the oil up there on the housing itself, on the oil filter housing, and then I'll bring in a new one. One thing that I can't, or I could show you, but one thing, a good practice, if you can, it doesn't you kind of can't do it on this one because of the way the oil filter sits at a 90-degree angle. But if you were able to, if the filter went straight up, you could actually fill the new oil filter with oil, and that way you kind of prevent a dry start. So go ahead, spray some brake clean up there to get all the old oil out. Okay. Put a thin film of clean engine oil onto the O-ring gasket before you put it onto the filter housing. Helps prevent it from sticking in future oil changes. So go ahead, we'll run this up here. So go as far as you can with your hand. Take out your makeshift oil guide. Clean this up a little bit, clean that up. I'm just going to go a little bit past where it stopped. Okay, that's good. You don't have to crank down on this or anything. So the new oil filter's in place. The oil pan bolt is in place. Do not start the engine without any oil. We're going to fill this thing out. 4 7/8 is close enough to 5. So actually just going to put 5 quarts in this thing. So we got some clean liqui moly here. Double check your oil pan bolt and your new oil filter. Make sure those are in place, because you don't want to start pouring this stuff and then have it just drain right back out of the bottom. But I know mine are on, so let's just fill this up with 5 quarts of oil. Next thing will be to do is put the dipstick back into place, oil fill cap back into place, fire up the engine, get it on the ground, a flat surface, let it sit for about 5 minutes, and then go ahead and pull your dipstick out, clean it off once, put it back in, check it, make sure you're close or on the mark that you need to be. If it's a little bit low, go ahead, add some. After about 100 miles of driving, check your oil again, just to make sure that you're on the mark. Get a rag, pull that out of the way, clean that. You don't want to drip oil all over the vehicle. Get any spills down there. Double check your cap, oil filler cap, clean that off. Go ahead, put that into place. Put your dipstick back down into place. Do a dummy check on the bottom. Make sure you have your oil drain pan out of the way. You don't want to run over this thing. So I'll go ahead and grab mine. Next thing we'll do is fire up the engine, get the vehicle off the ramps, put it onto flat ground, shut off the engine, let it sit 5 or 10 minutes. Pull out your dipstick, clean it off once, put it back into the oil dipstick tube, pull it out one more time, and then double check these marks. So as you see right here, this is the bottom of the dipstick. There's one hole here, one hole there. There's a L for low and H. Your oil should be at that mark or right near that mark, that hole, that dot. After about 100, 200 miles, 500 miles, if it's in the middle, go ahead, add some to get it back to the H mark, the hole in the dipstick. If it's at low, if it's at this hole, the bottom, most very bottom hole, put a quart of oil in just to bring it in that much more. And you don't want to see, I've pulled out dipsticks where you can't even register. There's no oil registered on the dipstick at all. That is a bad sign. People don't want to open up their hoods anymore. The two causes of catastrophic engine failure are no oil in the engine and lack of coolant. So if you do those two things on a monthly basis, check your engine oil, check your coolant, you'll be good to go. No offense against women. If you're a woman and you don't know how to do it, pull up to any garage, ask them for help. Mechanics are pigs. They will help you figure out where your dipstick is and how to check your coolant. Just one note on the coolant, do not check it when the engine is hot because you could burn yourself. Wait until the engine's cold to check your coolant. Check your oil when it's cold. First thing in the morning is best. That way you let all the engine oil in the engine go down into the oil pan, and it gives you a true reading of how much oil you have. I'm not going to show you pulling the vehicle off or double checking it. Just make sure you double check it after you get off the ramps and after you've let it sit 5 or 10 minutes. If you have found any of my videos helpful, please consider subscribing to Bundys Garage. Questions, comments, concerns, you can always email me at bundysgarage@gmail.com. I answer back all comments left on my YouTube channel. And like always, I'll keep them rolling for you.